Welcome to Conversations with Kara-Leah, where we take a nuanced deep dive into all things related to spirituality, sexuality, power, and awakening. My name is Kara-Leah, and I'm your host for this journey. I invite you to relax back, open up, and get curious. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the love. This week on the show, I have Ellie Wilde. So Ellie Wilde and I have been friends for a number of years. Not even sure when I first met her, but she lives in Mount Maunganui, lives down in Tauranga with her son. She is a somatic sexologist, relationship and intimacy guide, and she's been doing this work for like 20 odd years. She loves exploring the feminine mysteries. She's all about heart and womb wisdom, about yin sexuality, relationship, intimacy, the power of human connection. Ellie was a facilitator for ISTA for a number of years, so no doubt we'll touch on that. It's definitely not the whole of what we're going to be talking about, though. Ellie has so much wisdom to offer about, wow, you know what? I'm not even going to put words in her mouth. I'm going to say, let's wait and see what she's got to say. Remember to hang around for after the interview when I do a little reflection on what we might have talked about. And if you haven't yet, please do subscribe so that you don't miss the next episodes of Conversation with Kara-Leah when they come out. Ellie Wilde, welcome to the show. Welcome to Conversations with Kara-Leah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah,
I'm thrilled to have you on the show. You know, as you know, you and I have had lots of deep and meaningful conversations around power dynamics, trauma-informed work, what it means to be a facilitator, and in particular, your journey, which I've been fascinated by. Like, I can't remember when we first met, but I was always like, who is that woman? She is a powerhouse. So thrilled to have you here today. And I want to know, let's start with where you are this week, today, this month. Like, where are you in the world and what's lighting you up right now?
So I'm in Tauranga, New Zealand, and what's lighting me up right now, actually really getting into Christmas this year. Not so much the buying the prezzies and stuff, but the celebration of getting together with others and solstice and kind of feeling like a bit of a celebratory feeling in me of like wanting to have fun and enjoying like this crazy weather. Like 1 minute it's pissing down with rain and the next minute it's beautiful sunshine here at the moment. And today it's beautiful sunshine. So yeah, it feels like for me at the moment it's like this feeling of making the most of life.
Yeah. What does that mean to you, making the most of life?
Yeah, I think it's like seizing opportunities that feel good. And also, you know, slowing down enough to be able to be in the experience of your life. Like, I think the younger me was very ambitious and had a lot of will, but I was often sort of thinking about the future and sort of charging ahead, and that's not really, you know, slowing down enough to smell the roses as well. Like, I really like taking time out in my work day and baking Christmas cookies and hanging them on the Christmas tree and having an afternoon nap and enjoying sitting out in the garden in the mornings. And yeah, I'm definitely learning to slow down a whole lot more, even though there is like quite a lot of energy coming back to me to want to produce things and co-create. I'm noticing that I'm only doing that in small chunks, and the rest of the time I'm nurturing myself and slowing down and
because you've been through a really interesting journey, I'd say, over the last 11, 12 years. So in 2011, you discovered ISTA, and then around 2020, like, I think when you wrote a post in September on Facebook, and you said that you did 14 international ISTA trainings as a facilitator over the 2-year period leading into COVID. Like, that's an enormous amount of traveling and holding space. I'm not quite sure where to start here. Like, do we start with your journey into ISTA and what that was like, or do we start with your journey out of ISTA and what that was like, to what you've learned in the last few years?
We could start anywhere. I mean, when you said that, and I recalled the 14 trainings, which, amazing countries I visited, so many people that I met and saw, and, there was a lot of beauty in that, as well as a lot of kind of exhaustion, and kind of maxing out my nervous system a bit too much. I just couldn't take in that many people, places and countries, and not the level that I want to connect with people at. So yeah, maybe we can start with kind of how I found myself in the lockdowns in 2020 and COVID. Like, I was actually like, oh, thank God, what a relief. Now I have an excuse to have collapsed and have my wheels fallen off, and I can pretend it's because of COVID, but actually it wasn't. It was really good timing, because I was kind of skidding to a halt here in New Zealand, and not just exhausted, I think. Yeah,
you talked in that post about your experience with ISTA as getting to a point where you were burned out, and that there was, so you were becoming more and more trauma informed as you went, and wanting to make ISTA more trauma informed, but not feeling like you were being supported in that particular thread. Can you share a little about just about your journey with ISTA? Because you were there for 9 years, and I imagine there was a lot of awesomeness and also other stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole thing with ISTA type spaces is this is what is taught, and this is what is in the culture, is like, these are transformational spaces. They're not therapeutic spaces. If you need a therapeutic space, go to a therapist. This is for transformation. And I agree with that. It's great if someone has some deep personal, psychological or emotional or, trauma. It's probably not the best thing to go into one of those spaces. However, there's no reason why in the transformational spaces we can't learn from the therapeutic world, and actually not even the therapeutic world, like some of the spaces I've been inhabiting over the last 3 years, and especially lately, they take kind of a trauma-informed approach, but it's a very transformational space, and it's very otherworldly sometimes and very archetypal, but it feels very different in my body and being. And I think that's what I was wanting to bring into ISTA, and what I was wanting to influence ISTA with. And what I'm learning now is the main big difference about it is that it's very it's all about choice every moment, even the way every word is spoken in the facilitation. There's so much choice in every moment. So whichever journey you're taking people on, even though they're being guided with so much permission just to find their own way. And it's just drummed in over and over. And it's just a very skillful facilitation that I'm experiencing at the moment myself as a participant, which is teaching me so much around how to hold group space for others. Yeah, and the main difference I can feel is there's just so much permission and so much choice in every moment. Yet it's not passive, and it doesn't lack direction. So you're still directing people, but in a way that is giving them permission to say no at any moment, or to change direction, or to,
I mean, my understanding of ISTA, like, I've never done any ISTA trainings, but my understanding is that there is permission to say no, and people are, there's pieces around consent and around boundaries, and people are encouraged to acknowledge and respect their boundaries. What was your experience because you were there from 2011 to 2020? So just to be clear for those of you watching, when we're speaking of ISTA, we're talking about ISTA historically and up until 2020. So we're not necessarily referring to what's going on right now. So yeah, in terms of consent boundaries, my understanding is that ISTA encouraged people to know their no's and to respect their no's.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's definitely there in the curriculum, and it's definitely something which is spoken of by the facilitation team and the assistants and the culture. However, when we're on microphones telling people to breathe, move, make sounds, come on, like, you know, the music's directing it in a certain way, everyone's doing a certain thing, there is a powerful influence happening that isn't giving people choice, and it isn't giving people the option in the moment to find their own, like it's in my experience, it's just not sensitive enough to the fact that some people just might be taking a very different route themselves. And I guess it also depends on the level of skill of the person who is navigating those processes. I'm sort of talking more about the more, you know, the ritual spaces that we took people through in ISTA. If someone has a very good level of awareness and a very deep sense of embodiment and knows themselves in their own way, then maybe they'll just ignore what's happening on the microphone and they'll just be like, ah. But, you know, to me, that's a missed opportunity, because a skillful facilitator can help those people go deeper as well, and help those people go to places that they maybe hadn't visited in themselves before, and help them unwind their trauma that they didn't even know they had. That's the difference. It's like to me, it just feels like another level up, like another refinement, another maturity of ways of holding space for people's embodiment, for people's accessing, you know, more of who they really are. I suppose that's why people come to places like ISTA. They want to access more of themselves.
So when COVID hit, you'd done these 14 international trainings, you know, you had been a big part of the ISTA community. Like, you kind of laid the groundwork for ISTA to come in and supported it to do what it did over a long period of time. What was it like on a personal and professional level? Like, did you choose to step away from ISTA at that point when COVID hit, or was there a period of like no events are happening anyway? Like, how was that?
There was a little bit of period of time when nothing was happening because none of us were traveling, and the restrictions were a little bit difficult to do trainings in. I did actually do a training in 2020. I went over to San Diego and worked with Kamala Devi. It was a beautiful training. But I was still feeling like maybe I was going in a different direction and I needed something slower. Perhaps, I guess in 2020, I was still in a bit of confusion about where I stood with ISTA and whether I wanted to continue with them. I knew that I couldn't continue in the way I had with that many trainings. And I decided in 2020, not only could we not really travel, I was like, actually, that's good for me. I don't really want to keep traveling like this anymore, as alluring as it is and exciting as it is to appear to be this kind of rock star that's traveling the world. And yeah, there's parts of it that might feel glamorous, and there's parts of it that just, I don't know, like I just couldn't, parts of me just cannot cope with it at all. It's just too much. So short answer is I was still with ISTA in 2020. I didn't actually leave ISTA officially until earlier this year. Before the complaints started coming out, something was telling me I needed to take myself away intuitively. And it was not connected to what's happened with the issues with ISTA and Haydn group, but maybe I felt it on some level. I don't know, but
When you finally made that decision to let go fully of something that had been such a big part of your identity, your community, professional organization, like the role you've played in the world for the last 10 years or so,
Yeah.
How'd that feel?
It was really hard. I had tried to leave before, and then I've got some really good connections with ISTA and spoke to those people and was like, no, I don't need to leave. I just need to be whatever I'm wanting to bring, like whatever I'm seeing is missing. I just need to be it within this organization. And but specifically in ISTA New Zealand, that was impossible to do so here. So, and because I didn't want to travel,
Right.
it was like, well, there's no place for me within it anymore.
So just feeling into all of that. One of the things you said in your post was that when you're talking about ISTA and then also Haydn, because they're separate, but they have a relationship to each other, and Haydn Manor is where the ISTA trainings have been held, and then there's also the 6-week Haydn training.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things you said was that you got to a point where you wouldn't override your felt experience and body in order to fit a group theory. Can you speak into that? Because I feel like that, what you said there, that sentence, I won't override my felt experience and body in order to fit something external. I feel like in some ways, this is the crux of
this is what I teach, this is what I am about. This is me. Like, this is like, how can I possibly, I don't care if it's my personality talking and I need to follow myself. I don't care. Like, if something is not feeling good in my system, I'm not a yes to it, and I won't be a yes to it, and I won't be forced to be a yes to it or coerced to be a yes to it. Even if some parts of me are screaming at me going, come on, come on, come on. I'm going to listen to the voice inside of me that's saying no, and I'm going to be curious about that voice and wonder what its intelligence is. And even if it's some kind of trauma response, it doesn't matter. It still is a valid part of my physiology that I have some wisdom to gain from listening to and cooperating with and learning about, and not necessarily learning in a cognitive sense, but through my embodied experience learning about. So what was the question? Did you just say something about that?
Yeah, when you're talking about your relationship to the ISTA community, and then when Haydn started to land in New Zealand, and the way that started to change things and what you were feeling there, and you were just like, I can't, people are saying, come do the training. You're like, I can't override my felt experience and my body.
No. And yeah, I mean, every time one of those temporal trainings happened, I felt it in my body, and I wanted to be there so badly. And I wanted to be where everybody I knew was, everyone that was any kind of like person in my life that was what I viewed as someone that was really on the cutting edge and into all these really cool transformational spaces and doing great work. And everybody was going, everyone. I was watching everyone one by one. And it was very difficult to feel myself not in that, and to be separate from that, and to stay with my own process of like that. This is what my body and being is telling me, and I need to honor that. And even though I felt like I was the only one that wasn't going, I had to listen to that. And I mean, that's about the Haydn experience, but which is different to ISTA. I think when the ISTA training started happening in Haydn, it changed ISTA New Zealand from being something that was more I mean, maybe COVID changed it as well, but it just sort of became like ISTA New Zealand is at Haydn, and it's got a very strong Haydn influence, and there's only certain teachers that can come here, and it's kind of like became part of the Haydn bubble, I guess. And something in my being and body and my soul, my journey is repelling from that, is not being. So that's why I guess I found myself in situations where I wasn't being invited to teach in New Zealand, and I wasn't resonating with that field, to use ISTA language,
Yeah.
It's going in another direction.
Yeah, so let's talk about that direction that you've been going in, because I've been reading all your posts, and you're talking about things like how we need to have safety and connection. You're talking about things like regenerative aliveness. You're talking about trauma alchemy, the difference between like holding space and the relational field, and the nervous system, and making small incremental changes over time rather than catharsis release. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, it just sounds like you've done such a deep dive into the multiple layers of the body and how to work skillfully with relational fields and trauma. So how do you describe the work that you're doing now?
Well, the body of work that I've been discovering is a body of work called Alchemical Alignment, and the teacher is Bridget Viskins, and she's a biodynamic cranial sacral therapist. She's like a shamanic Latvian kind of, God knows what, like very multidimensional. She's also a somatic experiencing practitioner, and so she, and amongst other things, and so she infuses all of that into the way she designs a trauma training to train people on how to meet trauma in other individuals, but also in the way she holds groups, her style of facilitation. And then there was also a student of hers, Rachel Maddox, that I did some training with, and another, I just want to name my teachers a little bit. Yeah. And then another student of Rachel's, Catherine Howe, that I did some one-on-one coaching with, trauma-informed coaching. And so all of that together over the last couple of years has, it's like, I mean, I've changed. I'm different than I was before. And it's been a steady, slow, easy unraveling of some old ways of being that weren't serving me anymore. That suddenly sort of thinking, oh, I don't do that anymore. Wait, when did that happen? Wow, okay. And then now starting to work with other people one-on-one at the moment. And this work, I guess, is it's more about connecting to our wholeness and what you might call regenerative aliveness or the breath of life, as a way of stabilizing what is in the system that is unstable. So it's kind of like, rather than the focus being on going into the trauma to fix the trauma, or going into the issue, or going into the difficulty to solve it and hash it out and work with it. And what we're doing more of the time is creating like this stronger connection to what feels whole and healthy, stronger connection to what feels stable, going at a slow enough pace that you can notice when you're losing presence with what you're working with and losing connection with the body, and then kind of like going back to the resource, or going back to what feels stable, going back to health and wholeness, and then coming back into difficulty. So it's a really, really gentle way of working with anything that's kind of not working in your system, I suppose. Or no, it's not working. That's actually a wrong way to say it. But anything that feels like it's a challenge or a difficulty or a pattern that you want to change.
Mm-hmm. So for example, like if I noticed that I had a pattern of people pleasing, which from a nervous system perspective might be seen as like a fawn, how would you work with that, with what it is that you're doing?
Well, I didn't say it's somatic focus. So first of all, we get really, really curious around, you might talk about it just a tiny little bit to touch into what it might feel like. And then we would find something, or you would find something that is like perfect fit in terms of the layer of support. So it might be, connecting to oceans or rivers or mountains, and then really feeling that for a period of time, that you can feel your body really settle into that vibration, I suppose you'd call. And then once that feels like your body's really anchored in that level of stability, you would perhaps begin talking about this pattern and and then noticing what's happening through your physical experience, through your emotional experience, perhaps even psychologically what's happening, and then we just be working with it bit by bit, just noticing, holding presence for it, noticing when you get outside of your wind of presence and stabilizing again, or it's kind of like a journey of connecting to stability and meeting what's happening through the body bit by bit in a sort of titrated way to help it metabolize, to help it move through, and to help. And another part of it that's really important is working with what's happening rather than trying to get rid of it. Because when we try and resist it and push it away, the more it kind of clings on. So, and it's really, as a practitioner, it's really letting go of any agenda whatsoever and just focusing on this person has this intelligence within them. They know. It's my job to trust that. It's my job to keep holding that vision and to keep helping them move towards that intelligence. So it's I've found it like both in my own healing journey and then working with others, like a big weight of pressure has got lifted off my shoulders that actually, I don't have all the answers. I don't know what this person needs. They do. It's my job to help them discover it.
I love that. So it's not outcome focused. It's focused on allowing the person's own wisdom or intelligence to guide them. And it's focused on orientating to wholeness and moving from that space. Yeah. So when you reflect on some of the methodologies that you used in ISTA, like the catharsis processes, etc., compared to this,
it's just a whole nother beast, eh? It's just a very different. I mean, I think that in some ways I do feel like, damn it, I do feel like I wish I could have stayed with ISTA and brought some of this in, but for me it just wasn't possible. I had to move away, and it is so very different. I mean, I did have a feeling that ISTA needed something more like this for many people, and spoke within the faculty but didn't really get any traction there. And all the points that I raise are things I think they are struggling with now and have been called out by. So it's a shame that the power structures that within ISTA, in my mind and in my experience, squash my voice a little bit.
How'd that feel, being in a transformational, organization and feeling that your voice is getting squashed when a lot of it is around apparently supporting people to be able to stand in power and speak from power and sovereignty, etc.?
Well, there's hierarchies of power within ISTA, because you've got the lead circle, which obviously has more responsibility within the organization. They lead the trainings, and so they're holding a stronger position of power. And then there's many, many, many co-facilitators, and then the apprentices, and then the assistants. So, and I think there's a lot of wisdom in the group that's not coming into the lead circle, which is a real shame, because the whole thing within that sort of organism is it's not meant to be top down or power over. Yeah, but my experience, it kind of is.
I mean, it's a big call to create any kind of organization that's not going to be hierarchical or power down, power over, because we live in a society that functions in that way. Like it's so embedded in how we operate. So I love the fact that they didn't want to do it that way, and maybe there's evolution happening now. Who knows? Just
next?
Yeah, so I'm thinking too, it's like, oh, where do we want to go next? I am curious about your own journey as a human, as an individual, in terms of, like, obviously sexuality is something that you're focused on a lot, like that conscious sexuality. And when you came out of ISTA, you began yin sexuality. So what makes sexuality yin? What does that mean?
Well, I don't know. I just, for my own, I started the menopause journey. Well, perimenopause started for me at 48. I'm 51 now. So I'm 3 years into, I haven't actually bled since 2019, July 2019. So I'm pretty, I'm postmenopausal now. And that really changed my sexuality. And I think the menopause journey is very much about truth. So when it comes to sexuality, it was like any way I was behaving in my sexuality that wasn't quite what I wanted started to become unbearable. And what I realized is that a lot of my sex life, my whole life, since I was an adult, I'd been like subtly trying to have sex in a way that I thought they liked. So, or men liked. And actually there was more of a longing in me. And this was even after exploring my sexuality quite consciously for 11 years. I mean, I definitely became much more orgasmic, much more sensitive, let go of a lot of shame. But I hadn't quite found the true language of my body, I don't think. It's still been trying to make it do something that was...
So still a slight, like, performative?
Yeah, like expected of the Tantra field, expected of the conscious sexuality field, expected of the partner I was with, like, rather than learning to really listen really deeply to my own body and let it slowly unwind in the way it wants to unwind and feel like what's the most natural, organic thing that wants to happen now. And that's when yin sexuality started to become a thing for me. And I started to realize I actually want like a lot more yin space. Like I want to slow down and not have any kind of goal. And I just like want to keep things very organic and not trying to make anything happen, and really luxuriate in that. And actually I've got such a hunger for it. Like it's something that I hadn't allowed myself as much, because I guess in the past I thought it was taking too long, they might be getting bored, this might be what they want. So yeah, I had a period of time with my then partner where I was asking for that a lot more, that kind of space a lot more. In fact, it must be really challenging for him, because I just wanted it all the time. I didn't really want any other kind of sex. I didn't want yang sex at all, which isn't balanced either. I feel like it's good to be able to explore a full range of our experience in anything in life. You might choose to specialize or go in a particular direction for a while, but you want to be able to have access to different range of experience usually. So I think because I'd had a big drought around what I really needed, there was a hunger in me for this yin space. And then I just thought, wow, if I'm feeling like this, I wonder how many other women there are out there. And I kind of came up with this notion that I think a lot of women are having sex like men, because that's what we've been conditioned to do. The narrative around sex, and even in sex positive communities and conscious sexuality, it seems like there's a drive for sort of making things reach a certain goal, or so if we're only exploring our sexuality as a way of going towards a certain goal, and there's an agenda on some subtle level, I think what it does is it freezes more organic sort of breath of life kind of energy of our sexuality that just blooms from a place of relaxation or letting go, or you know, it's a bit like the kind of trauma-informed work I've been doing in that style of facilitation. It's what happens when we let go of a gender. It's what happens when we trust the intelligence within our body, and then someone else, when you meet somebody else in that and you keep doing that, what can happen between the two of you. It's not like anything is right, I've got to do this now, and then you need to touch there, and then you have to press that button and make this happen, you know. I mean, that kind of thing can be fun too, don't get me wrong, but it's directive, and it's, you know, yang, and it's has a goal, and there's whole nother side. I think it's very interesting and actually really regenerative for women's bodies, and especially as you get older and coming towards menopause. Like, I feel like it's imperative that a woman finds that part of her sexuality. Otherwise, she'll just be like, nah, I don't like sex anymore. I think I'll just not have sex anymore. And how many women in our society do that?
I don't know. That's a good question.
A lot, I would tell you.
Okay. So what you're speaking of, like, I know for me with sexuality, the only place that I can and want to move from is presence. And if I'm with someone who has an agenda or expectations or is thinking about what he wants to do, I can't, like, does not compute, you know, it just doesn't compute. It, like, I'm not, you're not with me. Because if he's in his head, if he's operating from that space of being in his head, we're not actually meeting. And so it's really interesting to hear you describe it, because I think I've naturally found my way to that place, possibly because of the kind of embodiment practices and dance practices, that my expression of sexuality is very much about surrendering to the energy itself and just letting that move and however it wishes to, with no goal, no outcome, no agenda. Just doesn't, like I say, it doesn't compute.
Good to celebrate you, because that's definitely a space that we want to be able to get to as women, and it's an invitation for men to come into that place with us, and or not just men, our partners, whatever gender they are. So much more playful. Like, that's the thing from my perspective of moving from that space. It's like there is no agenda or expectations, but anything could happen because it's just presence, it's just expression that's coming through the being. So let's talk a little bit more about menopause, because I don't hear a lot of the conversations around. I know there's probably more going on now, and the journey of being a woman who's getting older, like every single woman on the planet, whether you're 20 or 50, you're getting older. Like, that's just a fact. And you're going to go through menopause at some point. So how has it felt for you becoming an older woman, going through menopause? What's it brought up? How have you dealt with it? Give us the juice. Oh, wow.
No pressure.
I feel like it's a bid like childbirth, like go through childbirth and go into parenthood, and you're like, why didn't anyone tell me how hard this was? Like, why didn't somebody warn me? Because we just tend to, in our society, talk about the nice things, and it's a bit like that with menopause. And I had heard stories, and you know, you hear people say, I sailed through it and it was fine, and other people like, oh my god, yeah, I was up all night, sweats. And so I guess I was shocked at first when it first started, because I was only 48 and it was quite sudden for me. And I noticed a rapid, because my periods just stopped once. They were 6 months apart for a couple of times, and then it just stopped. So and that was happening since 2018, and then 2019 it stopped completely. So, and I just got the hang of working with my cycle. I was like, it was in my calendar. I was like only organizing events and things when it was like the right time. I was like, oh my God, I just must. And then it stopped. I was like, okay, well, at least I managed, I don't know, a month or maybe, or I don't know. But so it was a shock for me to go, oh my gosh, like I'm not a menstruating woman anymore, therefore I'm not fertile. I had all sorts of thoughts of like, what does that mean? I had like a big journey around feeling like I was going to be left on the shelf kind of feeling. Like, and it didn't even feel like it was mine. It felt like a cultural, collective pain.
Yeah.
It really affected my sexuality, like quite considerably. I went from sort of feeling quite a lot of aliveness in my sexuality and my pussy to feeling like quite numb, which was really disturbing, given, you know, all the work that I've done. And, you know, it was Kyle, my partner at the time, we've been transitioning quite a long time. We're still very, very good friends and still lovers sometimes, but we're not in that partnership thing anymore. But at the time, you know, he's much younger than me, so it was really difficult for our connection because, he wasn't really, he wasn't really able to really hold space for me in the way I wanted him to. I wanted to be able to just be okay with not being sexual for a while. And it was really hard, that initial bit. And also the other symptom that I had that was quite strong was the emotional, psychological side of it. So I lost a lot of confidence, and I felt very like, I'd call it like a low level anxiety that was present in me all the time. And I actually felt like a car with its hazard lights on, like there's just something didn't feel right. And so I did change my diet and was sort of trying to clean things up and trying to really work on the emotional stuff. You know, my wheels were falling off and COVID was happening and my business was in shambles. The relationship was crashing. You know, it was just like, what the hell? Like, you know, everything is on every level is collapsing around. I'm collapsing, my everything. Yeah. What do you do? So, yeah, I kind of feel like it was a really powerful initiation for me to get really truthful with myself. Because what I noticed that was happening was I had zero tolerance for anything that wasn't feeling good on some level for me. So it's like that ability to accommodate others, that ability to just sort of gloss over things a bit, vanished. Like there's none of that anymore. So areas of my life where I'd been, where that was an issue, were becoming highlighted, and it was going through my life with a fine tooth comb, just kind of like taking away everything that wasn't really, you know, meant for me, I guess. So that was a lot of words, and there's so much more I could say. But what are you really curious about? Like what feels?
Well, what you're speaking of like how it can be an initiation, how there's, you know, physical side, but the mental, emotional. And one thing that I'm really curious about that you spoke into is the collective conditioning around what it means to be a woman and what it means to go through menopause. And it sounds like some of that collective conditioning was activated, because this is something that I feel like, so yeah, we have our individual conditioning, but there's definitely collective conditioning around things. And when we go through certain processes in life that have a physical, like starting menstruation and then childbirth, like you said, and then, you know, menopause, that it activates the social conditioning, and that has to be dealt with as well. So if you could speak more into that, like, did you feel like you would suddenly be less valued or less attractive? Or
it didn't make sense to a part of me that was like, that's not true, but then it felt so true. And I do think it's like a collective trauma that is in our society that perhaps, you know, other women my age feel of. And the overwhelming feeling that I kept having to struggle with and still am working with is being silenced, like, shut up, you know, or stop talking about that. And it's not something anyone's directly saying to me, but it just feels like a very strong energetic that's within our culture, which is silencing that mature female embodied feminine voice.
So what I see you doing, like you wrote a post I think yesterday, the day before on Facebook, where you were just like, I don't give a fuck and I'm going to name this stuff and I don't care anymore and I'm just speaking up. Is that you deliberately leaning into that felt sense of being silenced?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, a lot of my Facebook posts, I don't think about them beforehand. I'm just like, I'm going to write something I feel an impulse to, and I'll start writing and I won't even know what's coming out. And then, oh, this is coming out. Like yesterday, I wrote, it was going into my phone, like, what do I want to talk about on Facebook? Nothing. Damn it. There's nothing. There's zero. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I don't have an ability to be able to put things at the moment in order of this is what I'm talking about next. You know, it's more like this is what wants to come through in the moment in a very kind of unplanned way. And just learning to trust that more and more and more, I suppose.
So where do you feel then, having, you know, coming through menopause, the sort of the burning down of the old identity, re-emerging, where do you feel in relationship to power? You know, because obviously as a young woman, as a youthful woman, there's a certain power that's there just because of the power of youth, right? And now, obviously, I'm not young anymore, you're not young anymore. But I know for myself, I feel so much more centered and empowered than I ever did back then. So I'm curious, what's your relationship to power now? What does it mean to you? Where are you with it?
Well, it's not as important to me as it used to be. I think in myself, like whenever I tune into power, I automatically go down in my body and connect with like the lower part of my body in the earth. And I've been humbled around power. I've been humbled to tears, and I've just fucking surrendered. To be in a position of power over others, you know, to me is still edgy. Like I'm still trying to work out how to do that in a way that feels where I'm not giving my power away and making out that I don't know anything. Yet I am deeply honoring the others that are there and their power and their intelligence and the weight of what's in that. Those people that would gather to, you know, perhaps do something with me. So I'm in a, it feels like it's like I'm in a process of maturing what that relational feel might look like and how I might show up in that space with others. And yeah, when I think about power, I automatically go into not only my own personal power, but how I want to lead and how I want to show up in a place of guiding others. And yeah. But, you know, certainly in my personal life, I'm much more in my power, I guess, with regards to how I'm showing up in relationships with people, like friends and my ex-partner who I still live with, Kyle, who it's been an interesting journey, but we've kind of transitioned our relationship. And yeah, I've been humbled by that journey as well. So that's another more personal layer of power that I've had to just, that's been molding me. Like I've often had the feeling with menopause, like, this sounds quite harsh, but like a piece of metal that's been put in the furnace and made red hot and then taken out, and then it's just like being banged into, feels like a beautiful shape, but even so, it's like banging. And actually have to confess, and I do feel like I did feel a bit let down on myself that I needed this for some reason. I don't know why, but I am taking a small amount of bioidentical hormones just to ease the transition, because I felt like it was too much, too fast, too soon for my system. And my intention is to peter that out at some point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting how there's that not feeling great about doing it, but recognize it sounds like it's what's needed for the body.
Oh, it feels so much better. Yeah, I actually kind of feel more comfortable in my skin, and my sexuality kind of came back online again in a way where I have more range now. And yeah, like I'm still, maybe it'll be the next 10, 20 years that I'm unraveling what menopause is for me. And I don't feel like it's something that happens overnight. And I don't suddenly have my crone-ship on, this is the rest of my life. I get to work with this. The rest of my life, to uncover the intelligence that's in my body and how it works in relation. And it's like, sometimes I think with menopause, it's not that there's anything wrong with my body, it's what's wrong with the way we're living, and it's what's wrong with the system we're in, and it's not fitting with the way we do things in life. And it's not, I mean, I know Western women have a real hard time with menopause because of adrenal fatigue and thyroid issues and congested liver, and all those kind of things play a big role in physical symptoms being worse.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be interesting to know, which people in the world, which women are the healthiest that have the less menopause problems. Actually, it would be curious to know how they live their lives. And it's definitely something I want to explore more about.
Just a couple more questions before we wrap up. What do you wish, like if you could tell yourself age 46, 47, 48 about what was about to unfold for you in terms of the menopause and, leaving ISTA and like all of the things, what would you have told, or what would you tell that 46, 47-year-old Ellie?
Yeah, I think I'd just say, trust yourself. You've got this, You've got this. Like, you just trust yourself, because a lot of my my nature, my personality, like I've struggled massively with imposter syndrome, self-doubt, feel the fear and do it anyway kind of thing. And some of that is from my own developmental trauma, and some of it is just kind of like, it's like part of my personality, I suppose. So I can second guess myself, and I can not, judge myself. And I think, I would go back to the 46-year-old with a lot of compassion, a lot of kindness, and just tell her to trust herself.
And so then, final question, you're on sort of the dawn of your 50s.
Yeah.
What when you feel into what's coming, what you're bringing through, what might unfold, how do you feel? What do you see for the next few years, decade?
It's a good question. I'd like to think that whatever it is I do over the next 10 years is really helping this earth and everyone on it in some way. I'd like my life gets more and more meaningful, and that I get closer and closer to really experiencing who I am as a soul on this world, and what my unique niche is. I made a commitment to my soul to keep working with unraveling that. So in some ways I'm kind of feeling quite surrendered, and in other ways there's parts of me panicking, going, I mean, you should be building a brand, and kind of like, we should be going out in the world, we should be holding more workshops, and you should be da, 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 da. And I'm like, okay, all right, I hear you. We want to do that too, perhaps, if it's part of this plan. And then, as a soul, endeavoring to, I wouldn't say wake up, because I've already woken up, but more about really embodying that soul here on earth, you know, like I do feel pretty committed to keeping to surrender to that, however that looks. So it, yeah. There's a part of me that's like hitting me now, going, why do you want to do that? You know, it'd be really good to build a brand and make some financial stability and cash in on this that you're, you know, uncovering, and you've got a lot of experience, and yeah.
And yet I feel like,
yeah.
well, like when you speak, I really feel like this softness and this power and this expansiveness, and I can feel like, oh, what it's like for you to move from that space where it's not about go build. It's more just like, yeah, there's a quality to it, and I'm like, that quality is really freaking attractive. And you know, when I think about, I mean, I'm not in the so-called rat race, and I still get swept up sometimes and they're trying to get somewhere, and I'm like, wait a second, there's nowhere to get to. This is it. Just relax and savor the fuck out of it. So I feel like the wisdom that you're bringing through around slowing down and deepening and moving from that space, particularly for women who might be caught up in the speedy adrenaline gland blowing out kind of activities, we have so much to receive from you.
Yeah. I am very, I miss the group space massively. I miss having a community to serve. I miss that massively. And I do get back out there, and I do feel like what I'm learning will be of value to people and men as well. You know, I'm still kind of, even though I try to move away from the sexuality field, it's kind of following me. But yeah, I feel deeply like, you know, I think part of my design as a soul is, even though I struggle with people and I find it hard to find safety, connection with others, that's part of my medicine, is learning how to navigate that and then bring that to others. There's nothing after that. Why don't I say and? I think I thought I had to say something else.
Well, Ellie, thank you so much for coming on the show and having this conversation. I just want to honor your journey, over the last 12 or so years in particular, and the way you have shown up in this community and the way that you do lead and are leading, the way you're stepping out now. I feel very grateful that you're here and that you're a woman that I can look to,
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. And thank you for having me. And I love chatting with you. So it's been a pleasure as always.
So that was Ellie Wilde on Conversations with Kara-Leah. So glad to finally speak to Ellie. She, like I said, she joined ISTA in 2011, and she's really been on the inside of that particular organism and seen many things. So it was really beautiful to hear her speak of some of her experiences of being in that particular organism and all the trainings that she led. If you're curious to know more about her journey, she has been fairly explicit about it on some of her Facebook posts, and I will add links to those posts in the show notes so that you can find out more about Ellie. And of course, there'll be links to her body of work. Just big shout out to the women who are navigating menopause and making these transitions. I feel like in our society, we're still busting through some of the stereotypes, some of the conditioning, some of the ideas about what it means to be an older woman. And I find it really fascinating that Ellie's felt that silencing coming in, not directly from people, but like in the energetic field. And I think it's curious the way that she talked about how she's got no tolerance for bullshit anymore. She didn't use the word bullshit, I'm paraphrasing, but the way that she's like, yeah, I've got no tolerance for that. And I wonder if that's part of the power that can start to really come through as women age, right? What's it mean to be powerful older women? So big love to Ellie Wilde. Check out the links. And if you have not yet subscribed to Conversations with Kara-Leah, make sure you subscribe in all the places, whether you're watching on YouTube or Spotify or whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Because I will be back with more guests. We're talking spirituality, we're talking sexuality, we're talking power, and we are talking awakening and the intersection of all those things. So much love to you all. Thanks for listening to Conversations with Kara-Leah, and trust that you enjoyed that nuanced deep dive into spirituality, sexuality, power, and awakening. If you love my take on the spiritual path and you're looking for more insights like this, then make sure you subscribe and like. You can also check out my website, Kara-Leah.com. That's Karaleah.com. And subscribe to my weekly newsletter.